I'm also down in Lancaster, and I am a director of Morecambe Bay Community Renewables that owns the solar panels on Lancaster co-housing. And until recently, I was also a director of Burneside Community Energy, and I'll talk about that project a bit later. And in my day job, I work on energy and climate change with lots of organisations, including local authorities. So for this talk, I was asked to look at how can Kendal generate its own green and renewable energy. And I just want to start by talking about the type of energy that we need to think about. There's three main forms of energy that we use. The first is electricity for your lighting and anything that you plug in. And the second is heat to keep houses warm, keep ourselves warm in houses really. And the third one is transport fuel, which mostly at the moment is petrol or diesel for cars, vans, etc. If we want to move to a zero carbon future, we're not going to stop using that energy. So we need to be able to supply that energy from renewable sources. And the number of renewable sources that we have available to us is actually quite small. So we need to think about which type of renewable energy is suitable for which type of use. If you think about electricity, we're really quite good at renewable electricity in this country and many others. Over half of our renewable electricity comes from wind. About a quarter of it is offshore and a quarter of it is onshore. About a third comes from what we call bioenergy sources. So it's using things like landfill gas or gas that comes off your sewage, or burning wood and other plant matter to turn into electricity. So that's the same way that we've generated electricity in the past from, say, coal or gas, but we're just using a plant-based material for it. And then about 10 or 11% comes from hydro. And everything else is really, really small. So those are our options really for electricity. Sorry, solar. Solar's 10 or 11%. Hydro is a lot smaller, and that really is about what we've got available to us at the moment. If you look at heat, Kevin has mentioned some of these things already. You can use heat from the air or the ground or water through a heat pump, but to make that work, you need electricity. You can burn wood or other biomass, which is low carbon, not entirely zero carbon. But that's sort of going back to the fossil fuel basis, but using another fuel. And the final thing that is starting to grow is hydrogen. And we can use hydrogen in the same way that we use gas, by burning it basically in a boiler. But to create hydrogen, you either use a lot of fossil fuels or you use spare electricity from renewable electricity generation to turn into hydrogen. And then finally for transport, really our only options to replace the internal combustion engine are electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles. And hydrogen again comes from electricity. So where all that takes us back to is pretty much our only option for most of it is electricity. So we need to generate a lot more renewable electricity than we do already if we're going to cover all of our heat load and all of our transport load, as well as all of what we call our electric load at the moment. And I've done a little thing I thought I'd share with you. I think I'll share it quickly on the screen. Which is, hang on a minute, I seem to have lost Zoom, there we are. Which is, if we look at how much you would need to generate in Kendal to provide all of the energy that you need for your heat and for your transport that we do at the moment and for the electricity, you would need to have about 23 offshore wind turbines or 176 onshore wind turbines, or you'd need 300,000 homes to have PV on their roofs, or you'd need 24 square kilometres of solar farms. And that blue blob I've put there is on a map of Kendal, just south of Kendal. So everywhere, all the land between Kendal and the motorway basically would be covered with solar farms. Or you'd need 5,800 small hydro schemes of the size that there is already in Burneside, for example. So what that tells us is that we can't just do it by generating our own electricity locally to supply everything that's needed. We can generate some, but realistically, we're going to be relying on a mix of national generation of electricity from offshore wind and production of hydrogen, probably to feed into the gas network to take over from gas in the future, and support that with local generation where it is sensible to do it. So if you look at Kendal and what you can do in Kendal, you need to start thinking about where are the places that you can install renewable energy to supply locally. Realistically, your only main options in Kendal are solar PV and wind if you can get planning permission for it. Because there's been studies of the river done, there might be a little bit of capacity for hydro there, but there's not much else that you can do in your local area to generate renewable electricity. For heating, heat pumps will be an option, but we'll need to talk about how suitable they are for typical homes in Kendal. And at the moment, heat pumps are okay. They're best when you have a well-insulated home. So if you haven't been able to insulate your home properly, your heat pump will be very expensive to run. And biomass, so basically burning wood in some form, is also likely to be a suitable option for rural areas. And transport, pretty much it's about switching to electric vehicles. So all of that depends on having the infrastructure to be able to charge your vehicles, and people replacing their cars with an electric vehicle, which at the moment is a very expensive option. So that's a quick sort of summary of what we can do with renewable energy. I don't want to depress you all with those numbers, but you've got to be realistic about how much you actually can do. I was asked to look at examples of locally led renewable generation that were relevant to Kendal. I'm going to be honest and say I haven't found a town of about the same size as Kendal that you can compare it with. There's a lot of work going on in Lancaster, and Kevin can talk a bit more about that. But I've got a couple of examples that are at different ends of the scale. So Bristol, I think is a shining example of a council taking a lead to commit to zero carbon Bristol, and to support it with a lot of money and resources and officer input from the council to make it happen. So they were the first council to own their own wind turbines, for example. They own a solar farm. They facilitated a community-owned wind turbine recently. They've put massive amount of money into energy efficiency refurbishments across the city council buildings, but also across social housing. And one thing that they are doing now, which I think was really important for the future, is they are looking at all of the energy demand for their entire city and saying, how can we provide the best form of renewable energy for each different area and different types of community, different types of household, different types of development. So they're developing their own local area energy plan which will set out what they do specifically in each area, rather than just saying, oh, well, we've just got to provide renewable energy generally. They're going very specifically into what we do with different types of houses in the city. And I think that is the way that councils need to be thinking to move forward on developing something that is really specific for their city or town. There's lots of other cities that are doing similar things. Plymouth, Oxford, Greater Manchester are just some examples. Kevin's talked about Nottingham. What they all have in common is really strong local leadership. And to be honest, if you haven't got that in your council, you're not going to get an area-wide energy plan that works. So really strong, good council leadership that are determined to get things done, but it is essential. And if we look at the other end of the scale, I'm going to look at a couple of communities that are doing it for themselves. Over in Cambridgeshire, there is a village called Swaffham Prior. And if you Google Swaffham Prior, you will find out all about this. In their village, most of the houses are heated with oil, which is a really expensive way of heating. And they set up a community land trust to try and tackle the problem, and got together with the council, which is Cambridgeshire County Council, which is another council that I rate highly for their work on climate change. And they have started a project to put a district heat network in for the village that will supply the homes from renewable heat through a ground source heat pump and a district heating scheme. And working together with the council, the Community Land Trust has managed to get grant funding to do all of the development work, and is now actually digging up the roads and putting the project in, so that the homes in the village will be supplied by renewable energy by the middle of 2021. So that's an example of where a community group has got together and in partnership with the council is making a real step change in taking their entire village off fossil fuel heating. So it's worth looking into what they're doing. Closer to home, I've been working in Burneside for the last few years. Initially, putting solar panels all over the roofs of James Cropper's paper mill, which is a community energy project where we raised £580,000 in 2 share offers to put 590 kilowatts of PV all over the roofs of the mill. That electricity is all being used by the mill. It's actually a tiny proportion of what they use. But it's been a really interesting exercise in a village that small to raise that amount of money to do something locally that's providing a community benefit. And one of the first community benefits it's done is that we've put 20 kilowatts of PV on the roof of the school for free, so that the school is now getting renewable electricity as well.
Got 2 minutes left, Joe.
Okay, so that is the first project. The next project is a bit like the co-housing project in Lancaster. There is a village regeneration project that we are aiming to install community-owned renewable energy to supply new homes that are going to be built, so that those homes are zero carbon. And we're working with the developer to make sure that the community energy and the design of the buildings works together so that it's a zero carbon development. So I'm hoping I can say coming soon to a village near you for that one. There are a lot of difficulties with community energy. It's not a quick solution. It's hard work. You have lots of issues to get over. You have to have a lot of volunteer time, and you have to stick with it. But it is one solution that you can look at to raise finance to install renewable energy in locations that people might not do it themselves. So I'm happy to talk lots more about community energy at some point if you want me to. But I think I just want to sum up and say, community energy is a solution to a little bit of the problem, but you can't rely on it to be the solution, because realistically, the amount of energy that you will generate through community energy schemes is tiny compared to what you need. Haven't got time to talk about retrofit, but Kevin has covered that already, and I just want to echo his points that I'm really concerned about the government scheme, because cutting of previous funding on previous government schemes means we haven't got the skills available, we haven't got the businesses set up ready to do it, and there's a huge risk that the cowboys will jump in and sell and install products that actually will cause problems in the future. So I'm really wary about that whole thing. Thank you.